Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and in this video, I'm going to be actually teaching you how to rank characters, and we're going to rank every single character in this video in terms of their intrinsic value. First things first, what exactly is intrinsic value? We are taking 5 key traits of characters. If you want more detail and diving into like nitty-gritty explanation, you can check out this video here, which is very useful on our channel. But basically, it's looking at the DNA makeup of characters. Characters, very similar to human beings, we all have our own specific DNA, my goodness, DNA, and all of us are very different in terms of the individual makeup. And intrinsic value focuses on the individual makeup of characters in order to actually see whether they are going to last for the long run or whether they are going to get power crept very easily, because they are all focused on too niche a space. And even characters, maybe for a very quick example, like Soldier 11 is all focused on like DPS. You just have a fire DPS that does more and slightly more. Immediately the character is at risk. So that's what this video aims to do. You can find our framework explained. You can just like use one of these over here, or you can check out the video if you want more details on it as well. But we're going to be doing this for every single character. Let's start off with an easy one, and that is Unidora. So there are many different boxes over here that we will rank and we will basically classify. So if they fulfill a particular portion, that means their DNA makeup has, like in Unbi's case, good amounts of stun. Unbi also has some sort of damage scaling and some sort of energy regen, but they don't classify as supportive because she doesn't pass the energy she gets towards the entire team. So that's one of the important criteria. Helping yourself get more energy just helps you do your job better. Supportive and all these boxes really are helping your team, other people, rather than just individualistic and just yourself. Her DPS is okay, but I decided to leave her out of classifying crit just in line with the rest of the stun characters, even though you could justify that most stun characters can do a little bit of crit, but I just kept it consistent. All stun characters will not have a DPS crit classification because I just want to like let the DPS characters stand out a little bit more in that case. But this is of course very flexible, and the rating I give is 1. Of course, the ratings for everyone is different. If you are a person that values more DPS oriented, then you want to put more emphasis on this, maybe rank it for every box you have in these two categories, you will like multiply by 5 kind of thing. But for me, I'm just doing a very simple equal weight. Every single box is 1 point. There are pros and cons to that, but that is just the methodology that we are using in this video. So don't feel too upset. Doesn't mean your low score means you're trash. If your low score just means that you are your risk of getting another character coming into the game that might power creep you or eat your space up completely is much higher. The higher your score, of course, the harder it is for you to be completely obsolete, the more unique you are. Think of it as like traits. So a 1 will be a very pro footballer, basketballer like Kobe Bryant or something like that. LeBron James, you have your Cristiano Ronaldos. These kind of things that they are specialists, very good at 1. But of course, you can be a genius in many categories as well, which makes it much more difficult for anyone to power creep you. A young guy coming out and power creeping you or something like that. That's a very quick analogy. Of course, it's not perfect. Analogies are not perfect. It just helps us to understand better. Next up, we have Lyen here. So Lyen is a pretty decent character in terms of his ranking over here. He fulfills into stun, as most of the stun characters will have. Damage buffing, he increases the stun multiplier by a little bit, not as much as Tinge, but still does it quite well. And he has Ice Rest Shred, which makes him a very strong 3-pointer already. Pretty decent for the second character that we are reviewing. Now next up we have Collider, and as you can see, I'm trying to go this in terms of like order of character classifications, so it's much easier to understand when you compare them like apple to apple rather than like totally being different. For Collider here, she is also in the stun category over here and some damage amplification that she provides in her overall kit to her rest of her teammates. I put here versatility as Ben because she best performs with a teammate like Ben. I don't put penalty for red boxes, and for those of you who are like colorblind, apologies for different colors, but the ones with like darker tone in the center, those are bad. Those with like lighter tone in the center, the white tones in the center, those are good. Just for those of you who are colorblind, a real quick try to like make this simple for everyone to understand. So I put overall 2 without penalty for the lack of versatility because I didn't want to penalize characters who are like slightly more constrained. Maybe in future when we are like doing more serious ranking, then I'll take into account penalties and stuff like that. But for now, very simple analysis of the DNA makeup of characters. Collider will be a 2 in terms of the intrinsic value ranking. Tinge, new character. Currently, as of time of recording, she's the banner character over here. Her ranking is very close to Lyen. So she is good for stun and insane amounts of damage buffing in terms of stun damage amplification, and is super versatile from her additional ability too. So if you look at two characters like Lyen here as well as Tinge, you can see that even though their ranking is 3, they feel about the same, but where they outperform is slightly different. So Lyen is more like for his damage amplification, which is ice rest threat on the enemy, whereas Tinge on the other hand is really for her versatility in terms of her additional ability being fit to most teams. That is where she differentiates herself from Lyen. They are both very good characters, and as you can see by now, the intrinsic value ranked Unbe 1, Collator 2, and 3-3 for Tinge, where Tinge stands out for versatility, Lyen stands out for his ice rest threat in terms of the stun category. That is for the first round of fighting, ranking each other. But now let's go on to the next one, which is also very fun, and this is where you actually see the scores are going to be, of course, a little bit lesser than the stun characters because of the fact is the rating. So take these scores in respect to their category, rather than every single character in the game, because at the end of the day, you still need someone to do the damage. You can't just have like a team of 3 supports and then like all very high scores, but then you have no one doing the damage. So that's one of the key things that I want to talk about. It's more important to look within the group rather than across the spectrum of characters. So Billy, he is a crit DPS, mainly for crit. I know some people built him like anomaly back in like CBT days, but for the most people, I'm just going to go with like the standard build, even though there are very niche builds you can do and force every character to run anomaly. Billy, mainly DPS. He is very good in range, has a very long range. I previously marked him as mobility also, but I decided to leave mobility for faster moving characters to be just consistent across the board. Mobility is talking about how fast you can get close. I give him a green for his range as well. So overall score 2 for Billy, not too bad. Corrin. Now Corrin is, I rate her 3. She does a crit. Again, she can be in others, but I'm just going to keep it standardized. DPS crit here. She does decent amount of stagger. I noticed that her stagger rate or interruption of the enemy is much higher. Stun and stagger is slightly different. Stun is how fast you break the enemies. Stagger is how fast you how can you knock back, interrupt the enemy's attack sequence. And Corrin, I find, does it decently well. So that is a factor that is definitely worth mentioning on. She also gets damage amplification with her M2. Just some physical rest threat reduction up to amount. So this is passable onto the rest of your team. So that's why I classify it as a green, which means you help the team reduce enemy rest. So damage amplification. Damage buffing is buffing your team. Damage amplification is shredding enemy something. So 3 for Corrin, already not too bad. Next up, we have Anton over here. Anton is crit DPS. He has damage mitigation in his M2. He does gain a little bit of shield. Damage mitigation for him, so even though he doesn't pass that shield on to teammates, I would say that he has some sort of survivability built in, which is good enough for me to rank him in terms of this portion here. And even though he's melee, I'll give him the range and / mini category as well, because he has one of the best AoEs in the game with both his bursts, his chain attacks and stuff like that, and swapping in. So overall 3 score for Anton as well. So you have your DPSs, all the A ranked DPSs quite clustered together. But now is when they start to pull apart. And let's take a look at some of the other S ranked DPSs. You have Nekomata, good crit, very good mobility. She has like that dash that you can dash behind the enemies, basically like a blink ability where you can immediately go behind the units. I classify that as a 2. I didn't give it a range / melee because I felt that she's still more of her strengths lie in mobility rather than being AoE damage dealer, even though her out does a decent amount of AoE, but it's not super a lot. So I'll put it as mobility crit category for Nekomata. Again, I know you can build her a little bit for anomaly, but I just want to go for a standard build at this early stage of the game, 1.1. Maybe in future, if there are more anomaly characters might change. And this is a prime example of where intrinsic value is very important to consider. Doesn't mean Soldier 11 is a bad character by any means, but this just tells you all your eggs are in one basket. She is a fire DPS focused on doing damage, and that's about it. She offers nothing much else in her overall kit, just DPS. So if you are, let's say, Lionel Messi, and Lionel Messi is getting old, you have new characters coming into the game, like maybe youngsters are much more gifted nowadays, then you're going to get power crap very quickly. Whereas if you are a player, for example, like Xabi Alonso, and then you are like really good at coaching and stuff, you might even become a coach later on because you have still other categories that you are really strong in as well. So those are some like things to think about and where intrinsic value is important to consider. Soldier 11 is at very high risk of having another fire character coming in that does the exact same job as her better, and even in some other categories. So although she's really still good in her category right now, that is one key thing to consider, and that's the true value of intrinsic value analyzing this way up. If you're finding value in this video so far, please do give us a like, subscribe, and for more such content. I will do this analysis for every new character coming up as well when we are talking about the new character, so they can always see what are the high level overview of what the DNA makeup is in that character. Now moving on, next up we have Alan's ranking in terms of intrinsic value. So Alan here outperforms in not only a DPS crit category, she has a lot of multipliers, and as you can see, one of the things we don't factor in is how many buffs they go into one. It's just whether they are good in that category or not. But she has tons of mobility. So super high mobility in her shark form, the dashing ability, helping you dodge a lot of obstacles, get around enemies, flee from attacks, close the gap very quickly, which saves you time and helps you clear much faster, getting you a higher score. So I'll call Alan a 2. And now let's compare this together with the other limited DPS, which is Zhu Yuan. So Zhu Yuan sacrifices mobility in terms of ability to close gaps very fast and instead trades that with range damage. She also has a little bit of AoE in her ranged attacks, unlike Billy, who is like one bullet. Hers is like a shotgun spraying ability, so that is good value also in terms of range melee category. She is again more classified as a DPS crit for now, with a same rating of 2. So you can see that most of the DPS characters have a very concentrated rating of like 1, 2, or 3, 1, 2, or 3, just by the DNA makeup of these characters, where they are really primarily focused on doing a lot of damage, which is very understandable, and it's also another reason why attack DPS characters tend to get power crept very quickly, because there's not too much things that differentiate them, and intrinsic value actually exposes this in numerically to show us how this is actually mathematically why that happens. And next up, one of the highest rated characters on this list, and that is going to be Nicole Demara. I am excluding support characters having the access to very great W engines. This is specifically talking about the character's kit itself and what makes them good. So that is a caveat that I want to point out. We are not discriminating which type you are having better access to W engines, just looking at the character itself. Nicole, she has great mobility, not because she is most fast. She's not the fastest moving character, she's slow, but her bullet that she fires at the enemy with her enhanced skill, her chain attacks and whatnot, allows you to quick assist the enemy in. Basically, you can close the gap very quickly because she fires the bullet. The bullet is basically like your movement speed. Once you hit the target, you quick assist in, you are right in front of the target. I consider that as a team-wide gap close, so mobility is quite high. She's ranged as well, so she can attack from distance. You don't have to close the gap. That I would consider that as a plus. She offers crowd control, one of the rare sources of CC now, especially with like M4 or like higher mindscapes. Her ball increases in size to become massive, gigantic size, so that is very strong. And of course, she doesn't take up too much field time to get most of her kit working, and it's more quick swap in nature. She does mostly damage amplification, which is debuffing the enemy. Damage buffing of her kit actually comes from the rest of it, like W engines and whatnot, which I exclude. Versatility for support characters, I put a plus if you can be played into teams outside of your element, outside of your faction. That's when I consider you a versatile character. If you can only be played in one element, one style, and you have like detriment if you move elsewhere, I wouldn't say you are a very versatile character. So Nicole is one of the highest I've rated on so far, 6, and you will see that support characters generally are slightly higher because of just the many categories they can push in. And next up, we have Sokaku. So now a very good character also, but this is where you contrast and you see the true difference between two very strong units. One of the biggest issues of Sokaku is her versatility. She doesn't play into good teams other than just focus on ice teams, which currently, like in 1.0, was like the best in slot team ever. There wasn't too many other options. That's why Sokaku's value was very high. But as the game progresses, and that's why you saw a video on why speedrunners play Nicole, she's much more flexible. Sokaku's flexibility limits her in the near to medium term, but she still does massive amounts of damage buffing and even some damage amplification with her M4 for shredding the enemy's resistances. So that is pretty solid. She's still best in class, best in slot for ice teams specifically, but you can see that generally it might be easier to power creep a character like Sokaku because of the lesser categories that she fulfills. And for the next one, we have here the other support, Lucy here, which is also another support character, a fire support unit. And Lucy has decent amount of mobility. She throws her balls. You can gap close, very similar to Nicole as well, in terms of how you help your team. So not your mobility, she's quite slow, but how you help your team gap close also is counted in mobility category. Range, her boss can fly at range, so I consider that as a decent range, even though her character itself is more melee in nature. And damage buffing for the most of the team, good amounts of damage buffing, giving her a solid 3 as well. So very high ratings for the support so far. And now we have Reena here. Reena is a S rank support character in the electric faction, electric category. She is good in mobility, probably one of the best movement characters in the game. She moves the fastest. I think she's even faster than Ellen, because Ellen you have to at least like double right click or like double dash in order to get into a mode. Reena is just dash once she enters her flying state and super nimble, and you can attack and move at the same time, which doesn't really degrade her mobility, and that is very insane. Ellen, you still have to like stop here and there. Characters like Lyen, characters like Grace, you have to like, the movement is not as fast. Reena is a ridiculously high movement speed. Range is very high. And at the same time, not only does mobility and movement matter, but she also has a lot of damage buffing, a lot of damage amplification from resistance shredding, increases shock duration, and increases electric damage for your team. Very, very good unit, but again, very niche, focus into electric teams, rank 4. If the first DPS, limited DPS in the game was electric, Reena's value will be ridiculously high, but because it's ice, Sokaku's value was the one that went up initially. So once we have actually electric limited DPS that's very strong, Reena's value will likely shoot up for that time being. Moving on from the supports, you can see that the supports were like 6, 3, 3, 4. But now let's move on to another category for the anomaly one, which currently we only have 2 to 3 characters in the game. So I'll make this quick and then we'll move on to the last category, which is the new characters. I'll leave the new character to the end. This one is Piper, physical anomaly damage, and she also gets damage buffing. She buffs the team, I think she has 20 stacks or something like that, some of the team damage increase. So really focus as a damage dealer, on-field damage dealer for anomaly-based teams. Intrinsic value is 2. And you compare this to Grace, who is going to be more or less the opposite of Piper in terms of field time. She takes up super little amount of field time. Grace, she offers you tons of range ability. That gap, you can just throw your bomb, get off very quickly with like less than 1 second or something, and does a lot of DPS in terms of anomaly damage. So very strong electric damage dealer, can fit into most teams as well. Doesn't have to be specifically electric or shock based teams, because she can actually solo prop shock quite reliably if you build her well. I will give her a 3 as well for Grace. And moving on to the defense faction, and then we'll talk about a new character. So Ben is one of 2 defense characters currently in the game as of time of recording. Again, if you are interested in new characters like Bernice, Caesar, who are like in future patches, stay tuned to the channel. We'll do this rating for like every single character, and I'll share with you my thoughts as we go along too. But for Ben, focus mostly on damage mitigation, as most defense units are, for that shielding protection, and he also has decent amount of stun. If you can get him to high enough mindscapes, you can see his M6 here does increase his stun amount, the days amount that you do, which is something that I noticed in defense characters. There are something like a hybrid protection / stun character for a defense unit. And next up, we have Seth, a new character in the game. Now this one, his kit is fully announced already in the story mode, so nothing to do with leaks or anything. But I think this is probably one of the highest rated characters I have in this entire list, and you will see why over here. Very, very flexible. He has some sort of stun factor in him. Good amounts of days in his overall kit. Not going to be as high as the stun DPSs, but it's a decent amount of stun proxy. He has damage buffing in terms of anomaly buffing that you are looking for. You have damage amplification by removing enemies' build-up rest to anomaly-based build-up. So that is a debuff on the enemy. He also has damage mitigation because you can put a shielding on, and he is very versatile because he can really be fit into many different situations as a defense-specific character for damage mitigation. For anomaly buffer, like a support, he can also be played as a stun factor kind of unit. Very, very versatile. I think he is going to be quite valuable A rank, especially if you don't intend to pull more defense-specific characters in future and you like playing anomaly. I'll rate him a 5 out of all. And you can check out our more videos on Seth, like his team compositions on the channel, which I highly recommend you check out. And if you're interested in Jane Doe, who's coming out in the second half of 1.1, I'll have this video up for you as well. Meanwhile, I highly recommend you check out these 2 videos right here, which talks a bit more about intrinsic value in the depth. Or perhaps you want to couple that with extrinsic value, because intrinsic is one thing, is in what's inside of you, but we also need to know the environment around and what affects power creep based on the things that change around us. Check out either of these 2 videos, you'll find it very helpful. And thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe for more of such future similar content on the channel. This is our value add, and thank you again so much for watching. See you next video.